welcome to this session. This is part of our webinar series that we've been running here at Tempra, together with the Social Pedagogy Professional Association based in the UK, as well as the Social Pedagogy Association based in the US. And we've started this off just on the basis that it seemed kind of important during the pandemic, during these turbulent times, to really kind of understand what are the kind of things around social pedagogy, how are people using different concepts in practice, and what can we actually do to support people in practice at these crucial times. So that's why we thought, actually, let's do a free webinar series and find out more about how different concepts are being used in practice and the difference they are making. So I am going to start us off in a moment by giving a brief introduction into Haltung, which is our theme for today. And then I will hand over to Ian and Cath and Mike, respectively, who will talk about what Haltung has, kind of, the relevance of Haltung in their professional practice. And then we'll have an opportunity to hear from everybody else as well. So to bring you all into the discussion, and at the end to draw out key learning points for practice. I should also mention that we are recording this webinar, as we have with all the other ones, so that we've got this available on our YouTube channel in due course. If you have any concerns about being seen, you needn't worry, you can leave your video on. Your video would only appear in the recording if you are actually saying something in the plenary, so in this particular Zoom room rather than in the breakout rooms. But if you have any concerns later on, then get in touch with me and I can make sure that there's that your video isn't part of the recording in the end. Okay, so Haltung is one of the few German terms that we introduce people on our training courses to. And the reason for that is because, in effect, there is no suitable English term for it. Haltung roughly translates as ethos or stance, but it goes far deeper than that, I think, arguably. To give you an example of what it means, we've got this picture of Greta Thunberg, who I think really encapsulates what this is really all about. In effect, Haltung is about how do we guide our life and our actions in life by our deepest beliefs, by the values we hold dearest. And it is really about the extent to which we're authentic in living and breathing the things we believe in. In Greta's case, she clearly decided that some serious action was needed around climate strikes, around climate change, and really kind of made sure that whatever she is doing, has been doing over the last several years, is really reflective of that particular belief. And of course, that's been a real inspiration to other people because of the strength of her Haltung, because she's really congruent and really, really accepting that this is kind of, very often quite inconvenient. So it's not necessarily taking the easy route when we live up to our Haltung, to our beliefs, but it is something that, causes potential discomfort, inconvenience as well. And I think that's something that needs to be kept in mind when we talk about Haltung in social pedagogical terms. So in that sense, Haltung really means the extent to which we practice what we preach, if you want to put it like this, to which we guide our actions by the things we feel are worth living for or worth fighting for in life, if you want to put it in those terms. In that sense, obviously, you know, the strength of your Haltung, the extent to which you show your Haltung, doesn't necessarily mean that you have fantastic values like Greta, but you know, you could have horrific values that are all about, I don't know, wanting to dominate the world, wanting to be the most powerful person, or stuff like that. And you might be very effective in, you know, living your life in accordance with those principles. So in social pedagogical terms, we are looking for a particular type of Haltung, if that makes sense. And we want our Haltung to be guided by two lighthouses, for the want of a better word. One aspect is around how can we make sure that we show empathy and understanding in our practice? How can we try and really relate to the people that we support? Try to get really close to them in terms of our emotional connection and the way we try to relate, the way we try to understand what they are going through and what this might mean and what the implications are for how we can meaningfully support them. Okay. And at the same time, we need to make sure that we don't over-empathize, that we don't kind of assume that, oh, I've been there myself, I know what this feels like, or I've met people who've gone through this, through a similar thing, whether that is, you know, caring for someone who has dementia, or going through a bereavement, or, you know, having your parents divorce, or, you know, any range of different kind of life experiences that somebody might be going through. We must make sure that we don't just feel like, oh, actually, we know exactly what they might be going through, how they must be feeling, because we've been there ourselves. So we've worked previously with people who've been there ourselves. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that there's this other lighthouse as well, that we also show regard for every person's uniqueness, that we show that we understand that people are different from us, they are others, they are not us. And so therefore we need to show unconditional regard for their diversity and for their human dignity, for their right to make different decisions, and for the fact that they will be experiencing things in ways that are unique to them. So we need to always keep that in mind when we work in practice. Now, in between this, in order to navigate between those lighthouses, we need to try and find a way in which we are congruent, in which we find ourselves being authentic in that moving between empathy and regard. So we need to do that in ways that actually feel like we're not just doing it for the sake of, oh, this is what we have to do, but actually because it's really felt, it's really reflective of who we are as individuals. And so that's what comes across. Now, we're going to hear a couple of examples in a moment, but yeah, I think I'm going to just leave it at that, because I think Ian is probably in the best position to give us some good insights into what that looks like on a daily basis, and in different roles. So I'm going to hand over to Ian Jones, who is a senior lecturer at Nottingham University, and also a foster carer. Ian, over to you.
Thank you, Gabriel. Yeah, interesting, those three key terms. I've got them written down on my sheet here as well. I'll see if I can relate to them. So I kind of will think of a catchy line for this one, this short, brief 5-minute chat, but I've just named it Journey So Far, because I think the COVID pandemic is still a journey. We haven't finished there, so we still continue on this journey. And I kind of highlighted, you know, the pandemic, changes have happened in all our lives. And then it's almost like, you know, I'm asking myself, I'm reflecting what's happened to my own Haltung, as you know. And so towards the end, hopefully you'll see what's happened to my Haltung. Next slide, please, Gabriel. Thank you. So I'll do it from two perspectives. One, as I call the professional, so the senior lecturer, and I'll just kind of reflect and allude to some brief changes that have happened regarding my professional aspect of my life. And again, this is how I kind of saw it as the large change. So going from a possibility of being maybe redundant from one position to actually halfway through the pandemic to gain a brand new position and a new place. So that again threw up lots of challenges professionally. For example, I did go through a kind of experience of loss from my old colleagues who I've been working with for around 8 years. But in the pandemic, you couldn't really meet up with them to do the exit, to kind of do the changes, there's the goodbyes. It was kind of a sharp end leave, take your laptop, off you go. And then throughout that, something new happened. I was offered a new position that was kind of a positive. But so again, I've had to regain and re-establish relationships with new people. Again, you know, through the pandemic, looking at teaching, we've had to create new kind of ways of working in what I call the virtual world. And I'm sure lots of experienced this, where I've had to adapt to Zoom and Teams and telephones again, and having different ways of teaching. And examples of that is I've actually, when I was a teacher, I've created what I call a hybrid model. So again, it was important for myself to be safe going onto a campus, to a university, but at the same time, understanding those that don't want to do that, but also doing the teaching with the students. It's again looking at ways of how they can feel safe, and the hybrid model was where I was teaching on campus at the same time having the lecture recorded, simultaneously having the teams in the background. So that was quite an interesting model to use. Professionally as well, the increased student support academically kind of almost went twofold, but particularly the increased pastoral emotional support dramatically increased. And again, that challenged my own Haltung. Or if I was there in person, you could almost, I suppose, understand the issues the students are going through. Whereas if you're on the end of a Zoom or a Teams screen, it's much more difficult. So almost really an increase again of emotional support and pastoral support, which again did challenge my own Haltung. Next slide, please. That's okay. Now this is the personal kind of perspective, and again another massive change in my life personally, where throughout the pandemic, my partner and I became a kinship foster carers for 2 young children, hence 2 little ones on the screen there. And these are not an actual image, by the way. This is just taken from an app. But again, we had to go through those difficult conversations about how to, for the best care of the 2 children, and that's what I class as a change reality. Realities happen, and again within the I suppose COVID pandemic situation, it almost becomes increased difficulties about those realities. Then we kind of have to go through this transition phase from the children from one side of the family to another part of the family, and having to resettle them, having to reestablish previous routines, and again having that kinship connection from previous that had to be reestablished. And it almost became what I call a reawakening of parenting role. I don't actually think it actually went away. I just think it kind of, we brought our own children up, and then now we're having to bring up our grandchildren. So it's like what I call a reawakening. Something to add, I suppose, to this, which is different, is what I call the conflicting issues with the kinship role. And I think whereas practitioners or whereas potential foster carers can sometimes have a separation from the personal, I feel as a kinship foster carer, you don't. It's always will be there, and you have to go through that process and trying to manage that difficult position. And this is then why I've tried to reflect upon this. So is the kinship foster carer the professional, as I was explained to me the other day from one of our social workers, or actually is it is it more the personal? And I would say it's possibly a combination of both. So I suppose linking to a Haltung, what I've had to reflect upon is through the professional and the personal, it has been challenged. I've had to really think very carefully about how I perceive students' needs, and constantly think, okay, we have a system, we have an infrastructure, we have a process within universities, but actually sometimes you have to challenge that, and you have to kind of break the mold a little bit and do the extra for the students. So we took that approach, and it kind of seemed to work, where students now are feeling much more supported. And again, within the kinship role, challenging my own Haltung, we had to really, I'm constantly now thinking carefully about the children's, they're the key focus, and trying to manage that personal connection with family members where we are now bringing up the children. So I suppose it's, I mean, thinking back to some of the, I think it was Janet Kozak's idea around respecting a person's dignity, we found that actually you still have to respect dignity of, you know, the student, at the same time the dignity of the family members where the children these children have come from. So that has been a struggle and challenge on our own Haltung. And I suppose it's I think what I'm trying to say is it's like what Gibbler says about being congruent and having empathy, but then having positive regard. And it's trying to manage all those three at the same time, which I think I found difficult. And it's still taking place now. But I think trying to keep those things at the centre of what Haltung for me is about is it's how, you know, I say it as the essence of who we are and who I am. And if I can maintain that in the I suppose professional context role, but also personal, hopefully the central focus of what I'm there for should be able to kind of come through. I think I'll stop there, but I'm happy to unpack in more, some more details, some more examples in the breakout rooms afterwards, and then questions.
Yeah, great.
Okay,
thanks
Gabriel.
Thanks
There's lots more
very
to talk
much,
about, but
that's grand, and I think it makes an important point about, you know, just because we have Haltung as a framework doesn't mean that all the issues go away. It just gives us an opportunity to better understand what is it that's kind of causing the friction for myself, and how can I make sure that I reflect on it from an ethical perspective, that I don't lose sight of the importance of yeah, what are the ethical dimensions of my work, and how can I try and resolve them? So we'll hear a bit more about that later on. I'll hand over to Cath at this point, because you've talked a lot and you've written an excellent blog that picks up on this metaphor of Haltung is a bit like a skin rather than a jacket, and it's who we are. And there are situations when you feel like, actually, this is not the skin. I feel or I don't feel comfortable in my skin. It's kind of feeling really wrinkly, and something's going on there that needs to be addressed. Over to you, Cath.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, when I just finished the MA in Social Pedagogy Leadership at UCLan with Lois and Alice and Ali and Flo. And when we talked about Haltung and learned a bit more about that, it was an absolute light bulb moment for me that said, that's why I'm like I am. That's why things don't sit well with me. That's why I do this sort of work. Or yeah, and one of her assignments was to write a blog, and I wrote one. I can share the link later, and it was called "That Wrinkles My Haltung." And you know, when you've just got that feeling in your tummy that just doesn't sit well, it doesn't feel right. It's it does. It feels a bit wrinkly. So yeah, so learning more about that was an absolute light bulb moment for me. And for me, Haltung is very much at the heart of social pedagogy. It's all the stuff that Gabriel has said earlier about being authentic. Lois has a great phrase that it's your moral compass. And for me, it's reflected in our values. So I work with community circles and wellbeing teams. So community circles, we're a tiny charity that partner with lots of different organisations to help people keep connected to whatever matters to them. So whether that's building a circle of support around people or connecting people through shared interests, and wellbeing teams, supporting people to live well at home as part of the community. So a very holistic approach to home care. So we're underpinned by our values, and that's around compassion. So our values: compassion, responsibility, curiosity, creativity, flourishing and collaboration. So we work alongside Jackie Lefevre, who's our values expert from Mine Essence. And just thinking about all the things that you want to see and feel and hear and experience in your work within wellbeing teams and within community circles. So when we think about compassion, that's, you know, the walking alongside people, that we're kind, we have that empathy. Yeah, very much fit with what Gabriel shared earlier, you know, the responsibility, that we're accountable to each other, curiosity, that we're really interested in people, that we think about that learning, exploring what matters to people, being creative, so seizing opportunities, not restricted by, hopefully by hierarchy and bureaucracy. So operating as a self-managed team really fits in well with us, and flourishing. So we think about aspirations for our team members, for the people that we support, you know, people choosing their own way, and the collaboration, that we work alongside people and communities and colleagues, and very much about sharing what we do and learning together. So our colleagues, we all, as individuals, we do our own values, and values are unique to people. But I think, so it's not to say work with me and have the same values as me. That's not what we think, but work with us and have the values that underpin the work we do. So yeah, having kind and compassionate care is massively important. But when we think about our own individual values, we think about, could I share my screen? Would that be all right?
Yes, give it a try.
Oh yeah, can do. Yeah, hang on a sec. There we go. So can everybody see that all right?
Yep.
Yeah, lovely. I'll just pop that up a sec. So these are my values. So when we work with Jackie, so it's about 60 questions that you just answer very naturally, and very cleverly she comes up with your top values. So family, belonging, so, and that's me to an absolute T, whether that's through work or through home, having that sense of belonging. So that's felt really wrinkly throughout the pandemic, because you've not had the same opportunities to connect with people, or doing it via Zoom, so we've had to think differently around that. How is my value of family and how is that nourished when everything's on Zoom and we're not connected, and I haven't had a hug apart from my husband and my kids, you know, so all that sort of stuff. So we do our own individual values, and then it's not just what's written on a piece of paper, it's how do these show up through work. So we have our values, are they evident in the one-page profile that we have? So thinking about that snapshot of who you are on a sheet of paper. It influences our team agreements that we have together. And we think about, you know, what's showing up in your values, is that bringing you joy at work? So for my colleague Sharon, creativity is really high on her values. So how does that show up at work for you? So we would check in around that. So doing graphics, being a really visual storyteller, that's what makes sense to her. So being able to have that and being playful and creative within your work role is really important. But yeah, thinking about, you know, sharing, listening and trust, and that's, well, search and meaning for me, and keeping learning is really important. So how do I nourish that value? So thinking about the social pedagogy read journal club that I'm part of, you know, keep learning new stuff and connecting through the webinars and hearing from other people. Yeah, and the sharing, listening and trust. When we do our individual ones, we can bring them together to think about our values. This is, so the colleagues I work with at community circles, we've all done our individual ones, and then we sort of bring them together in our top 10 values. And I did laugh because I shared this as part of my innovation project, and one of the feedback was, oh, there's no control values in your value list. Do you actually get anything done? And surprisingly, we do really. But we're very much around relational and developmental values. But one of our values from our team is sharing, listening and trust. And we think individually, does that show up in your one-page profile? Is that what you feel? Have you got that space of psychological safety, where you feel comfortable to share. Are we listening well to each other? Have we got that connection around trust? And that influences our team agreements. So one of our team agreements based on that value is we listen to each other with open minds and hearts, and we share our mistakes and we share our learning. And we have some, you know, we'd love to do that in face-to-face as well, but we do have some Slack channels where we do a Friday failure. So we think about what's not been great this week, but what have we learned from that. But we also think about the win of the week, where we celebrate our successes. Yeah, and we check in, are we having that space where we've got really good conversations happening between us? But yeah, very much the values that and a Haltung that underpin all that we do, and we make sure that that comes through in the way we work. Yeah, and it's not set in stone, so we just keep reflecting and we think, and then, you know, we think, is that wrinkle in your Haltung? And I think learning about it has made me feel much more confident to say, ooh, wrinkles my Haltung, I'm not doing that. That doesn't sit well with me. Oh, that feels great, let's do that. You know, so that's about sharing my screen.
That's brilliant, Cath. Thanks very much. I think it really shows both the importance for you as an individual and the work that you've all gone through to kind of really dig deep and really understand what are the values, what are the things that are really important in your lives, both professional and personal, and how can you make sure that the ways you work with each other at community circles enable you to express those values and to check in and to develop them. So that's really fantastic and really interesting to also get more of an insight into both what you've done individually and as a team to kind of make sure that the structures, the processes, the routines and rituals you have enable you to do that well and to do that in a way that keeps growing and keeps evolving. So thanks for sharing that. I'll hand over to Mike, who's been on kind of a similar journey, I guess, and throughout the pandemic has gathered a lot of kind of interesting insights into what's happening to our Haltung and how, as an organization that you're responsible for empowerment, how have you guys kind of used your Haltung and reclaimed it?
Thanks, Gabriel. Good morning, everybody, from an equally rainy Blackpool. Good to see everybody. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about Haltung. You know, life would be so much easier without Haltung. That's my first conclusion, by the way, but it wouldn't be right. I think just a bit about me and about the organisation that I lead. We're called Empowerment, based in Blackpool, and we are an advocacy charity, so a small organisation. And we provide advocacy for people in hospitals, in mental health units, in schools, in care homes, people, children, young people, adults, but people who are extremely vulnerable, and in situations where other people are making decisions, key decisions about their lives. And therefore the role of the advocate, because we're an advocacy organisation, is to be by their side, ensuring that their voice is heard, their needs are met, their human rights are respected. And it's based on what we call the advocacy relationship, the relationship of trust between two equals. And that relationship is built by face-to-face contact, by being in the same room as each other. And that's key, being in the same room as each other. Our Haltung, our values, kindness, justice, equality, we live those. And I think, you know, we love the analogy of Haltung being a skin and not a coat you can just take off. It's something that's unique to us. It's something that actually it informs every part of our work. But the relationship is key. And in March of last year, decisions were made about us as an organisation and as a nation that we had no control over. We went into lockdown. And I made the decision, not very socially pedagogical, I have to say, and I am studying in my second year of the MA of Social Pedagogical Leadership, so there's my mea culpa, to send everybody home. Why? Because that's what we were being told to do, and because I wanted to keep everybody safe. I wanted to keep everybody safe in this, in a very uncertain, unknown environment of COVID. I think the motivation was good. But as those weeks went along, then, and I'd like to quote Cath Barton and her wrinkling of the Haltung. My Haltung and the Haltung of ourselves as a team felt that something was wrong about this, because we were no longer side by side with people. We were doing all these things by Zoom, Teams, phone calls, etc. And the team were heroic and creative in how they made best use of that technology. Incredible things they did, but they were not by the side of the people that we serve. And they knew, and we knew, that actually that this wasn't right. Therefore, we had a couple of what we call COVID reflection days, not a very original title, but part of our Haltung as well is to reflect and actually to fess up and to actually be honest with each other. And these amazing days, which were very emotional, very heartrending at times, but we all agreed together, almost unanimously, that actually, if we were to lock down again, this was last year, then we couldn't do what we did last time, just go back to our homes. We wanted to continue working by the side of the people that we support. Yes, we wanted to do that safely. Yes, we didn't want to be breaking government guidelines, etc. But we wanted the confidence of our Haltung, the confidence of our beliefs, and the confidence of our work to actually say we need to be backed by the side of those people we serve. So in lockdowns 2 and 3, I think that's how many we've had so far, we actually had a very different approach, and our staff increasingly went back out into the community, and Zoom and Teams and phone calls have become an exception now for us. They're still there, but they've become an exception. We're actually back by the side of the people. Regular testing and vaccinations have helped us with that, but that's also caused us other moral dilemmas and difficulties, because some of the staff didn't want the vaccination. And our Haltung again means that actually we have to respect people's personal decisions. We have to respect their human rights. But on my conclusion, my reflection of the last year is as well as a kind of a real sense of a real emotive pride at the team of how they've actually wrestled and worked through these very, very difficult challenges. But it was also about my own reflection, which was when health and safety is your only preoccupation, and as Gabriel said before, the ethics of what we do take a secondary place to that, then that wrinkles our Haltung. That's just wrong. And I think what we've learned together is that health and safety, as important as those things are, keeping each other safe is important, but actually our values are in relationship, the relationship with the other, relationship with equal. And yes, we've learned this year that we can have forms of relationship via technology. We're doing that now. But for the people that we serve, the people we work alongside, they want us and they need us by their side in the same room, especially when decisions are being made. So that's about getting back in touch with, the purpose of those reflection days was to get back in touch with our Haltung. What is our Haltung? And remember that we're an organization based on relationships. So I think, and that's why I started at the beginning, is that life would be easier without Haltung, but it wouldn't be right. And I think the thing what we've learned most than ever is that actually the importance of reflection. We live our lives forward, but if we don't reflect and get back in touch with our Haltung, then I think we can go in directions which are not true to ourselves, both individually and as an organization. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mike. That's really insightful, and I think it touches upon many of those challenges that we've probably all encountered in one way or another. And as you say, I think it's about not choosing the easy route, and recognizing that we have to live with the decisions that we make one way or another. So I'm very curious to open it up now, and we'll put you into breakout rooms for just about 5 to 7 minutes to give you a chance to discuss this question and share a bit with each other about what's happened to your Haltung during the pandemic. So feel free to share any examples that you might have, any reflections, having heard from Mike and Cath and Ian so far, and just have a little conversation about your Haltung and what's happened to it during the pandemic. So hopefully we have given you at least a little bit of time to have some interesting conversations. I know there's never enough time, particularly when you have a huge group of really fascinating people. We could give you 2 hours and it wouldn't be enough time, but hopefully it's given you a chance to kind of tap into conversations around what's happened to your Haltung during the pandemic. And I'd be really interested in any kind of examples you might want to share, or any points you want to expand on based on what we've heard previously. So I'll just hand over to whoever would like to tell us a little bit about Haltung and any reflections you've had from your practice. Anybody keen to go?
I don't mind saying something, Gabriel.
Go on, Simon.
It was a great conversation. Sorry, Cath, we lost you halfway through something that was going to be very wise. I am absolutely sure. My own personal reflection is, as much as anything, reflecting my Haltung against the organisation I work for. Up and honest, I work for a large local authority called Derbyshire County Council, and I've loved working for them. They've given us a lot of freedom with what we've done in terms of workforce development around social pedagogy and relational work, and I've been fortunate to be part of that. But given that our training was as close as it could possibly be at a human level, to a point of pretty much getting people to do fingertip dancing on the day one of any course, it meant that changed radically. And I think from my perspective, it's changed how I think about how I work within my organisation, how I'm being maverick as a person in a nice controlling organisation before lockdown was easy, and now has become very difficult. And am I in the right place? Should I be moving on? Should I be doing things differently? How do I challenge back to a big authority that really doesn't want to listen to anybody who isn't talking about health and safety and COVID responses at the moment? And how do I be creative and responsive in that? And therefore it's not feeding me very much, so I'm becoming less good at feeding into that organisation and keeping that alive and alight. I'm relying on my Haltung to do that, rather than having my Haltung flourish and, in a sense, just spontaneously create that for me. That's been my reflection. I'm not quite there yet, but this has been really helpful.
Okay, thanks very much, Simon. That's really honest, and I think it kind of really makes a nice link between Haltung and performance. So when we talk about we want people to perform at their best, then we really need to make sure that they feel nourished, they feel in congruence with their Haltung, with their values. And when that's not given, you probably aren't bringing out the best as an organization in the people that work for you. Great. Maggie, I think you wanted to say
Well, I was
something.
just going to, some of the people in my group were kind of new to their organizations when the pandemic locked everything down. So they still feel like new members of staff, really. And that's quite scary, to go back to a team you've been working with, but actually not feel as though you really know them. And then another point was that because all of us work within the care industry, anything to do with the pandemic hasn't felt natural or fitted with our personal values at any time, really. So keeping people safe, like the chap said before, isn't any good if people are miserable and unhappy, is it?
Yeah. So we normally work with much broader definitions around health and well-being, than just physical health. Yeah, absolutely. Any other contributions, reflections?
We talked in our group about how I think Cath's example is a really good one. So as an organisation, you can have core values, but it's about understanding that people will see those core values in maybe slightly different ways and act them out in slightly different ways, and that's absolutely fine. And actually having those discussions around Haltung really help you do that. I know that we did some training with some social workers in Tameside, and one of them suddenly said, "Oh my God, I've just realised that I think about the way we work in this way, but some of my colleagues see it differently." And so she was going to go back and have a conversation with them about, like, what does this actually mean to you? And actually, I think then you have that shared understanding, and that differences and different approaches are absolutely fine as long as you've got that foundational Haltung, but you coming at it from a different way is a really good example of regard, isn't it? That, you know, there's different ways of being congruent, of being empathic, of being compassionate, and they're not right or wrong. They're just, you know, that's a team, isn't it?
Yep. Absolutely. And I think there's something to be said about what Cath and Mike really expanded upon is when you try to use Haltung and values within an organization, when you try to make an ethical, you know, the ethical aspect of your practice, the center of your practice, then you also need to have a framework that allows those conversations, those reflections, but also allows you to make decisions on the basis of the kind of messiness of ethical dilemmas that you're bound to get in. And I think this is something that we're probably not very used to think about, you know, decision making and the dilemmas in ethical terms, and to navigate them. And there's something about what frameworks do we actually have that allow us, that mean that we don't just fall back to policies and procedures that somebody else has written for us with a view of keeping the organization out of any legal trouble, but actually, how do we deal with the messiness of the ethical dilemmas that we face, and how are we honest about that? And I think that's probably something where, if like Cath and Mike, you wanted to find out more about it, a good place to learn more about it is definitely the MA in Social Pedagogy Leadership at the University of Central Lancashire. So I'm sure that Lois will be posting a link to this in a moment, because it's a great course and it will be running online, fully online. So you won't even need to be anywhere near to Preston in order to be able to do it. And yeah, part of that is very much about how do we deal with ethical dilemmas as part of our role as leaders, whether that's formal leaders or informal leaders, because at the end of the day, we all have a responsibility and an opportunity, I guess, to put ethics at the heart of our own individual decisions, and to kind of help others bring that out, and to make sure that the ethical dimension, that kind of ethical perspective around values and what's right and wrong, and, you know, what about human rights, those kinds of questions, that they are really paramount, that they don't get forgotten in practice. So I'm mindful of time and that we are nearly there. I want to give another kind of opportunity for people to just bring out any learning points from today, because one of the things we want to do is draw out all the different key learning points for people from the respective webinars and come up with some sort of awesome visualization of why is it worth learning about social pedagogy concepts. So if you want to, you can just put stuff in the chat just now, any key learning points for you from today's session, or you can just tell us now over the next couple of minutes as well. So happy to hear from anyone else who would like to say anything. If people are happy to just kind of put their thoughts into the chat, that's fine. In that case, I will just do another announcement as well, because we're co-hosting a large international conference on the 22nd to the 24th of June So that's coming up really soon. That's co-organized with the University of Central Lancashire and with the Social Pedagogy Association. And we're hoping to, contribute to the discourse around social pedagogy and social education across the globe. The theme is creating hope in dystopia. So if you feel a little bit like actually we're living in times where, things are happening that are unprecedented and, wrinkling your Haltung big style, then this might be a good place to reflect and to explore and to network and find new ideas and new inspiration for how can we actually make sure that we as key people who are there to give hope to others, that we also feel a sense of hope ourselves. And sometimes that's really not that easy when you work at the sharp end of the front line, as many of you do. So Lewis has also posted a link to that international conference, and it will be another great opportunity to deepen the dialogue. And we've also got another free webinar of this series coming up on, I want to say, the 27th of May. That will be around life space as the next theme. It's actually it is the 26th of May. Same time, same place, and we will send out the registration link for that again. And if you want to contribute, if you want to be part of the fishbowl in the beginning, then just drop me an email and we'll make sure that you're part of it. Otherwise, I'll use the opportunity to say a big thanks to all of you for logging in. And of course, particularly to the contributors, Ian and Cath and Mike. It's been brilliant, really insightful. And I hope to see you all again soon. Take care, everyone. Thanks for joining us.